John Singletary announced his bid for mayor of North Charleston on August 20th. And in this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with him one-on-one. Singletary.
How are you doing today, Quintin?
I'm doing just great. Tell me, how are you?
Doing just fine.
Yeah. We survived a severe weather over the weekend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think we've had a few deaths in the state, but North Charleston been it's weathered it pretty good.
That's awesome. Let's switch to politics.
Sure.
You know, North Charleston Mayor Keith Summey told Channel 4 that you basically have a personal vendetta against the city. As we sit here right now, tell me, what is your vendetta with the city?
I have no vendetta. That's a personal opinion. Everybody have them. There's no reason why I would have a personal vendetta. I mean, I have no idea what he's talking about.
Okay.
You would have to ask him.
Let's move to another issue that you are addressing right now. You said this to Channel 4, quote, "There's public corruption, and it's the single largest issue the city faces. It causes joblessness, it causes contracts to be disproportionately assigned, it causes high crime, it causes police brutality, it causes deficient education." So walk me through how alleged public corruption is leading to joblessness, contract denials, high crime, and other issues in the city of North Charleston.
Sure. For one, public corruption, we're talking about nepotism. When we have a total of $65 million that we use in wages, roughly $10 million goes to African Americans, and $56 million goes to the Caucasian population. It causes joblessness within the African American community. We're getting less than 15% of the jobs, but we're 50% of the population. That's an unequal distribution based on regimenting, based on who you know, nepotism and cronyism, and as a result, it places the African American community at a disadvantage when it comes to jobs, hence joblessness. And chronic joblessness leads to a high crime rate. When we look at Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow book, it's clear that chronic joblessness in a neighborhood correlates with high crime. When it comes to education, when we look at, in some areas, academic magnet, the School of the Arts, a disproportionate amount of money simply because of the connection to the mayor, it being in the front yard. They're given more of the city's resources. When we have, throughout this whole city, several schools, it is the only one of the few schools that has a passing grade. There's 4 of them: the Academic Magnet, the Military Magnet, the School of the Arts, and Gap. But those are county schools. We have not one high school that's a city school that is passing. The disproportionate amount of money that's given to those county schools where his son is the chair, and
Charleston County.
Right, in Charleston County. And so they're passing. So our students in North Charleston are left at a disadvantage simply because of the relationship. We are 50th on the very bottom when it comes to quality of education. When we take a look at the fact that $144 million was given back to the Department of Education for the race to the top, and we are racing to the bottom, it's just atrocious that our children would be allowed to get substandard education. We've got over 15,000 students in North Charleston.
Right.
We've got over $100 million budget to educate our children with quality education. However, because of the close personal connection, some schools get more than others, and as a result, our quality of education is at the very bottom in the nation. Public corruption leads to that because it's a disproportionate assignment of the resources. When we take a look at community resources, it's the very same thing. When we take a look at contracts, 40 million in contracts, African Americans are 50% of the population, but yet they only get 2 million of the contracts, whereas 38 million goes to family and friends and other people that it has been assigned to outside of that African American race. Let's take a look at the recent Navy base closing. And we look at the Naval Hospital that was sold. It was purchased for $2 million from the United States federal government. They recently sold it for $5 million to a LLC owned by Donald Trump Jr., or that he is connected with. And they sold that property. City property that's being sold has to be sold at fair market value. When we look at the fair market value, how do you determine that? You determine that with an appraisal. When we look at that settlement statement, there was no appraisal ever done on the property for the sale. How does a bank even allow or lend with no appraisal? How does the city determine how much they can sell it for? Forget what they paid for it. How do they determine what they can sell it for with no appraisal? It was supposed to be sold for $5 million, but we understand that right after that, $10 million was the amount that they went to the bank to get a loan at. So we sold it for less than half of the value, which is public corruption, because we're supposed to be selling it at fair market value. And then on top of that, they're allowed to go and then get a loan for twice the amount, then pay the city off and have $5 million left. Well, it didn't happen within the prescribed amount of time, and as a result, the property was supposed to automatically revert back to the city, so technically the city owns the property. There was also a $2 million, what's called a reverter credit, in that settlement statement. That means that the city still has ownership in the property. And so they really didn't sell it, so that's why continually the mayor is connected with the emails in a lawsuit that should be in the circuit court, because it's not a conveyance of property, it's a contractual dispute. Yet it is actually under the master in equity. It's in the wrong court to start with. And so all of those types of public corruption things lead to the degradation with the jobs, the contracts, the education, and the crime rate that we're talking about.
And let's talk more about the alleged use of taxpayer money. Apparently, the governor's office investigated the city of North Charleston for the use of taxpayer money to purchase cars for the coastal crisis chaplaincy. And you said this to Channel 4, quote, "The governor's office found fraudulent tendencies and had to make them put the money back. That's public corruption." Right now, as we sit here, whatever fraudulent tendencies are you alleging?
Well, let's take a look at pay to play. Pay to play, South Carolina has a statute, 8-13-1342, that deals with pay to play violations. It simply says that if you have a no-bid contract that has been given to someone, they are prohibited from then turning around and paying into your election campaign. When we look at Citrus has a no-bid contract that is alleged to be sole source, even though at least one other person has had that contract, so it technically it's not under the definition of sole source. Citrus turns around and donates to the mayor's campaign $1,000, the maximum. It is the old noisette, which is Art Titus, Dev Williams. It's illegal to do that. When we take a look at many of the other individuals who have donated, over $100,000, the majority of his budget comes from people who have contracts with the city. Many of them are no-bid contracts. And so they're illegally taking the taxpayers' dollars, circulating it back into his election campaign, which is illegal. And that's why I filed a complaint with the Ethics Commission based on pay-to-play violations. It's simply illegal.
And you touched on this a couple of, you touched on this earlier, but you basically said the allegations of nepotism and cronyism. You said the following: Driggers was hired for the position, $108,850, when we have experienced African Americans on the force, who have been on the force, well educated with master's degrees, who could not get consideration when it came to the position. In response to your allegation, Mayor Summey basically told Channel 4, quote, "I saw something in him that I needed: police experience, police knowledge, and a heart for people." Tell me, what do you see, or what did you see in Chief Driggers?
Without having any knowledge of any interviewing process, not being able to see his bio, in Chief Driggers, I saw someone who was willing to go along with the system to take a job that someone else might have been more qualified for. which means that you're simply willing to go along with the program even if it's to the detriment of the city. There should not be a time when you're not willing, if you're going to be the department head, to put up against other qualified people within the department, like Reggie Burgess, that you would not be willing to put up not only your record of doing the right thing, as well as your credentials, to have him also apply for the position. That was not done. And so it's nothing against Chief Driggers, because the mayor has the right to come in and for the departments to hire and fire as he sees fits.
Yeah.
The bylaws for the city, as well as the state code of laws, allows that to be done. So in that, the only thing that you could really say is that there was not fair opportunity given as it was in the past. They did a national search when it came to hiring Zumo. Why now would you use a different process, and a process that is connected to someone that you knew from the past, that you had been involved with something unethical, dealing with taking money for victim advocate children and then purchasing cars, having the governor's office to come back, make you give the money back in order to do the right thing. It just does not look good.
And let's talk more about allegations of corruption. You said the following, quote, $37,000 of city funds was given to do work, yard work, in a yard for the son, Elliott Summey. Now, a lot of people did not take issue with it who worked for the city, but taxpayers certainly had an issue. So tell me, what is the issue with the taxpayers?
The issue is that it is a public use, a private use of public funds. When you take $37,000 to upgrade the aesthetics for a house that your son purchased, so that they can turn around and resell it, it adds value to the property. There's a benefit there, and anytime something adds value and there's a benefit to it, then it is considered a tax benefit for the person receiving it, and for the people that's in the public that's paying, my tax dollars included. Everyone would like for someone to come and spend $37,000 in their yard, but we don't have that option, and we never would have known about it had not a concerned citizen who was concerned about their tax dollar say something about them using the money in order to beautify his son's yard. Now, you look at the interview that you did, that you asked him about, that's $37,000. The answer is much different than some of the answers given in the paper. There's several different answers that's been given. On the one hand, it said, well, the person who is the council person requested it. And then on the other hand, one of the answers was that it wasn't requested by a taxpayer, but that the city department saw where it was a problem and decided to fix it. Someone had to order this stuff. Somebody had to schedule employees to be there. All of those things takes an effort. It wasn't an invariable thing that happened. There was a lot of effort that went into doing that. And for someone to come and repair a sidewalk and tear up $37,000 worth of yard and shrubbery, it's just unfathomable.
Let's turn to Walter Scott. You said the following, I think he lost his job. I think he lost a job and gotten behind. That to me is the reason why he would have fled, because he was concerned about paying child support. So when you look back to April, when he had the encounter with the former North Charleston police officer, to right now, what sticks out in your mind?
Public corruption. When we take a look at the initial response was to cover up the actions of Slager. The initial response to the paper was that there was a confrontation, there was a struggle. Walter overpowered Slager, took the gun to use it as a weapon against him. That was far from the truth. Far from the truth. We see, based on the tape, videotape, that Walter was fleeing for his life and got shot in the back. You can't shoot a fleeing felon. It's illegal to do that. And so, in order to cover up the issue, I think it's a Tennessee versus Garner case. In order to cover it up, they said that he intimidated the police officer. The reason why I said that that's the reason why he fled, was simply because I understand, after working with the Father program for many years, being the state president for the Fatherhood Practitioners Network for several years, the issues that surround child support and how they are treated within the judicial system. They're treated worse than a murder criminal. In fact, Walter would have received worse treatment there than Slager does now as a person who has murdered someone. And so, absolutely, it wasn't that he was in a position that he could simply maintain his life by going over, getting booked, paying the fine. Absolutely not. When you get involved in the child support system in South Carolina, it is like no other. And so, absolutely, he tried to flee.
And from what I understand, he was really a personal fan of yours.
Absolutely. That's why his picture's up on the wall.
Right, I saw that when I came in.
I just seen him prior to that. I worked with him with the Father program. I knew that he was shortly going to be married. I knew that he wanted to make sure that he carried his kids to Disney for a vacation. All those things are gone. And then to have the city to come back and add insult to injury, they then illegally paid for the insurance for Slager's family. Now, I have no problem with making sure that Slager's family had some type of insurance. If you're fired from a job, which he was, then you have the option of going on to COBRA, you have the option of going on to Obamacare. But what the mayor did was, the mayor took an officious move to say that I am going to take an abuse of my discretion, call it executive privilege, and give insurance to someone who does not deserve it because they are not an employee of the city. Now what that does is that opens up the city to lawsuits because it's a disparity in treatment for someone else to be fired and their family not to receive insurance. Certainly Walter's family needs insurance. What about his children? When we take a look at not what was done, but how it was done, it puts the city in the position that they now have a liability and that they may have many lawsuits connected with the fact that you have given insurance to someone who has no connection whatsoever with the city, and you're taking taxpayers' dollars to do that.
And you mentioned Walter Scott's family. Tell me, how are the kids doing right now?
I haven't seen them. I've spoken with his brother, with some of his cousins, gone by the house, but I haven't seen his actual children.
Let's move to August 20th. It was the day that you actually announced your run for mayor of the city of North Charleston. Tell me, as we sit here right now, where were your heart and mind on that particular day?
Walter's family.
Okay. Oh. You know, all of our hearts and minds are still on Mother Emanuel. And, you know, on that particular day, which was June 17th, it was a really hot, humid day in Charleston. I was at home that night when I got the news on Twitter, and at the time, I thought it was inaccurate information. But as time went on, we knew that we had the unspeakable that it actually happened here in our city. Tell me, where were you when you got the news? And when you got the news, where were your heart and mind at that particular time?
I was right here at the office.
Okay.
DePayne, who was one of the people, one of our fallen angels in that Emmanuel 9, worked with this campaign. That's why her picture's up on the wall.
Yeah, I saw it too.
So it was not only a horrific incident, but it took the wind out of the sail for a lot of people here. As you know now, her daughters have stepped up to the plate to help with the campaign, so has her cousin, Darlene Townsend.
Right.
DePayne was a student of my mother's. My mother taught her and her parents. And so there was more than just the relationship of her being a part of the campaign. Right. There's a long history with the families. Most of her family members my mother taught out at Baptist Hill.
Yeah.
My mom's 80. She's still up and around doing well, and most of the students out there she taught. And so there was a close relationship. But other issues have come up concerning the Manual 9 that I think should have been looked at, and they never were.
Describe to me the following in one word: the Confederate flag removal.
The Confederate flag removal was a gesture that was certainly appreciated by most of the African Americans in the state. But when the flag comes down and racism goes up, is there any benefit in the flag going down? When we look at the state of South Carolina, and we look at the budget, we look at the fact that with procurement we get 3-4% of the contracts. We're at roughly 30% of the population. When we look at the amount of money that the state takes in, and we have not one black bank that gets their fair share of the money from the state. When we look at the number of jobs, and there's a disproportionate assignment for 30% of the population, the problem we have is that the coming down of the flag was good, but it has caused a backlash. When we look at Ecclesiastes 7 and 12, it says clearly that the two things that are going to protect this community are, one, our knowledge. And so that's why we must educate our people. And two, it will be the money, the economics. Now, better than both of those is the knowledge to know that God is there for salvation. But the two nuggets on the table, we can't ignore those. That is that we have been locked out of knowledge, and that's why we have chosen in this campaign for justice to educate people. Two, the economics. When we look at, we're getting 15% of the jobs, only 5% of the contracts. When there's a lawsuit that's filed by an African American in South Carolina, you are more apt to get a pretrial adjudication, summary judgment, or one of the other pretrial adjudications, and so they have restricted the access to the funding. That makes you a consumer perpetually, that no knowledge, no jobs, no contracts, no additional funding streams through other means that other people get to take advantage of. That means that you are locked in to a position that is very difficult to overcome. And that is the problem that we have in South Carolina, not a flag.
Describe to me the following in one word: the Confederate flag removal.
The Confederate flag removal.
One word.
Oh, in one word. Okay. Hoax.
Murray Hill, Dorchester Elementary, Garrett, the Citadel, and Butler University.
John Singletary.
Your children:
Love.
Chick-fil-A, Microsoft, Nuclear Steel, Hewlett-Packard, and the Olympics.
Career.
God.
My stronghold.
The city of North Charleston.
Place I love.
What you will do on day one as mayor.
I bring the city together.
John Singletary.
Next mayor.
Well, John Singletary, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.